Hi everyone, today I would like to make a short video on the differences between the ERDL Green Dominant and Brown Dominant and the ERDL RDF version, which is right here. Some people also call it RDF ERDL, whichever works for you. But there's a lot of confusion between these camouflages. And just to make it easy for you guys, I'm going to zoom in real close so that I can show you the main differences so you can tell apart, which is which, because it does get confusing, especially with the new Woodland. Well, it's not really new, but the Woodland camo, which also makes it even more confusing. It's not in here right now, but I will show it later in the video. Okay, so let's start with the earliest pattern of ERDL, which is this one right here. This is the Green Dominant ERDL camouflage. And what makes this, why they call it, Green Dominant, is basically this specific splotch, like right here. This is like has a greenish or light green, lime greenish kind of color. It's very light, and you can see how it's lighter from the darker green. And that's one of the reasons why they call this the Green Dominant. Just because the splotches, are just green. But when we look at the Brown Dominant, which is also, this one's also a Vietnam era, they call it Brown Dominant because, as you can see, the splotches are brown. It's like a, what call that, like maybe a khaki brown. But if you look right here, here's a comparison. You can see that this splotch is green, while this one is brown. And that's, the main difference between ERDL Green Dominant and Brown Dominant. Everything else about these uniforms is pretty much the same. The other splotches, like the black, the dark brown, and the green, are the same as in the Brown Dominant. As you can see, it has the same dark brown, black, and green. And one of the other ways you can probably tell is also the date. For example, mine right here, this is the Green Dominant, is dated 1968. Most of the Green Dominants were issued in the 60s, while when the Brown Dominants came around right here, get this one out the way for a second, these were issued, I would say, in the 70s, so early 70s all the way up to 1975. And this one has a date right here, you can check. It's right here, 1970. Now here's the tricky part. Now that you know that this is Green Dominant and this is Brown Dominant, I'm about to show you RDF ERDL, which is right here behind this. And that's this guy. And this is where people get confused, because as you can see, it looks almost completely the same as the Brown Dominant, at least from afar. If you look up close, you can spot the differences. Well, I also have I know this is very faded just because of how old it is, but I do have a new old stock Marine Corps cover, and this is RDF ERDL, as you can see. It's the same thing as this, but this camouflage is not the same as either of these ERDL camouflage. This is basically post-Vietnam, so this is after the war ended. And one way you can definitely tell, actually there's multiple ways, but one way for sure is looking at the cut. If you look at the Vietnam era, both of them, both have slanted pockets, as you can see right here. The Brown Dominant and Green Dominant have slanted pockets, just like, the old school Vietnam olive drab fatigues. And they also have really big pockets, like huge. These are, like, you can extend these pretty big. And as you can see, the Green Dominant here is the same slanted pocket. But when it comes to RDF, the pocket is basically this is like a pre-BDU cut. As you can see, the pockets are not slanted. they're straight. But they still have a bellow pocket. So these do open up if you put stuff in there. But all the way around, the pockets are straight. The other way you can tell is by looking at the splotches themselves. When you look at green dominant and brown dominant, those little shadows, like I don't know if you can see, it's right here. You see how it leaves a little shadow? Let's see if I can find a better one. See like little shadow here. You can see how it's almost like faint. But in the brown dominant, it has the same thing on the where the brown is. You can see how there's a little faint splotch right here. It's mostly because back then when they were printing these, it was a roller. So the roller must have, you know, moved a little bit, which created these little, small little shadow lines, almost very, very faint. You can barely see it. But when we look at RDF, those are completely gone. As you can see, there's no shadows at all, or like little, you know, faded lines. It's like completely printed perfectly. And even when we look at the hat, you can see there's no shadows. See how it's just a nice straight line on all the splotches? Well, this one, you can see how it's not as perfect. Those little, you know, the little shadows you can barely see from the printing. Another way you can tell is from the dates. As I showed you, this one was 1968, this was 1970. And if we look here, they changed where they put the little tag. And this one is 1980. So that's how you know. And this is also how you know this is not Woodland, because Woodland didn't come out till 1981. This is 1980. So this is a predecessor to the Woodland. You know, these were supposed to be like the next big thing, but I guess they went with Woodland for some odd reason. But yeah, that's the other way you can tell is by the dates. The brown dominant only survived up till I would say 79-ish. Then it got completely replaced by the RDF ERDL. And sometimes, this is what makes it more confusing, is sometimes you'll see these two, both of these, you know, green dominant, brown dominant, soldiers, believe it or not, both soldiers and Marines, would actually recycle these and mix them up, like mix up the colors and even make it to this cut. Those are, you can find those out, those are kind of rare, but I think that's what confuses people, is when they mix these up. Sometimes they'll, like, you know, take the pockets and put them here and make them straight. And those are technically post-Vietnam. They just did that so that so it can fit the new regulation of having, you know, the new BDU cut. So now that we got that out of the way and you can see the differences between these, now I'm going to show you Woodland, and this is going to probably make it even more confusing. But after RDF came out, it was rapidly replaced in 1981 by Woodland, which is this one. Now, as you can see, it kind of looks the same, but it's not. What they basically did was they took this, kept the, I guess, the new BDU cut, but they took out the bellowed pockets, as you can see. Those no longer exist on the new Woodland. It's just a flat pocket, but still the same cut, as you can see all around. But they, not only did they do that, but they kept the same splotch design on the RDF. You know, the same color, same, you know, splotches and everything. And they basically just blew it up. So, you know, kind of made them, all the splotches bigger, and they also darkened the color. As you can see, these, you know, the green, the brown, the black, and even the khaki is a, you know, it's completely darker than the RDF. As you can see, this is super light. And that was like one of the main problems why they replaced this, is because soldiers noticed that these tended to fade pretty quickly. And from here, as you can see, this is the new old stock of the RDF. It's too light, as you can see. I mean, it doesn't look bad now, but if, you know, if you were to wear this, you know, constantly in the sun and wash it all the time, this would fade to this color, which is like super bright. So the army basically just said, hey, let's just take that and, you know, make the patterns bigger and just more darker, so that as time goes by, you know, when you wash it, wear it, it will fade to a more, you know, it won't fade as bad as that color. Well, that concludes this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Here's all of the camos that I talked about. I did leave out the Woodland for, you know, last, just because I didn't want to confuse you guys even more. But as you can see, you have the Green Dominate ERDL, Brown Dominate ERDL, RDF ERDL, which also stands for Rapid Deployment Force ERDL, and then you have the Woodland. As you can see, these are all very different. Now let's show you, before we end this video, a quick close-up photo of all 4 of them, so you can see yourself and, you know, pause the video and analyze it. Thank you so much for watching.